A single photograph can not only define a moment, it can define history. Throughout our periods of conflict, from the Civil War to the Gulf Wars, combat photographers played a crucial role in capturing the essence of these human battles. Their lenses not only documented the horrors of war, but also became a medium through which the stories of soldiers and civilians, triumphs and tragedies were conveyed to the world. I'm your host, Bruce Whitman, and this is a snapshot into early wartime photographers. Next on Marking History. Here is the historical marker for Mathew Brady, the most celebrated photographer of the 19th century and the father of photojournalism. His memorial marker is located in the Congressional Cemetery, southeast Washington, D.C. Mathew Brady is most famous for putting a team of photographers together who documented the horrors of the American Civil War, some of them in 3D. Before wartime photography was invented, battles were documented through carvings, drawings, and paintings. From 10,000-year-old prehistoric cave drawings to the painted pottery of Greek warriors, from the famous Bayeux Tapestry portrayal of the Battle of Hastings in 1066, to the American Revolutionary War paintings by John Trumbull and James Peale in the 1770s, war was depicted as glorious and righteous. This was in stark contrast to the experience of civilian audiences after the advent of photography. In 1837, Louis Daguerre, a French painter and physicist, invented the first practical process of photography, known as the daguerreotype. The method produced direct positive images onto silver-coated copper plates, creating the first permanent photograph. This Boulevard du Temple photograph of 1837 or 1838 is one of the earliest surviving daguerreotypes produced by Louis Daguerre. Due to the long 7-minute exposure time, many individuals who walked the street were not in place long enough to make an impression. However, in the lower left corner of the photograph, we can see a man standing and getting his shoes polished. This image is widely considered to be the very first photograph to include an image of a human. What a peaceful scene. Later, this process would change forever how the public perceived war. Samuel Morse, a historical painter and better known as the inventor of the telegraph, was in Paris, meeting with fellow painter and inventor Louis Daguerre in 1839. The American was amazed by Daguerre's photographic breakthrough. Morse wrote, "The exquisite minuteness of the delineation cannot be conceived. No painting or engraving ever approached it. The effect of the lens upon the picture was in a great degree like that of a telescope in nature." That same year, Samuel Morse brings photography to America. He returns with one of Daguerre's cameras and opens up a daguerreotype portrait studio in New York City. He begins teaching the process to several others. And here's the connection. One of his students is Mathew Brady, the future Civil War photographer. The first photographs of war were made in 1847. When an unknown American photographer produced a series of 50 daguerreotypes depicting scenes from the Mexican-American War in Saltillo, Mexico. These images covered a range of subjects, from portraits of generals to landscapes, street scenes, and post-war burial grounds. While the images provided insight into the daily life on the periphery of the war, they were especially notable for what they do not depict. Neither active battles or wounded or dead bodies, nor the idealization and glory sometimes associated with war. wartime photography emerged as a powerful medium during the American Civil War, marking the first time that the American public witnessed the brutal realities of armed conflict through visual documentation. Mathew Brady is widely regarded as the father of photojournalism and one of the most influential photographers of the 19th century. His work during the American Civil War played a pivotal role in shaping the public's perception of war and established him as a pioneer in the field of photojournalism. Using the new wet plate negative process, Mathew Brady led a team of hired photographers known as the Brady Studio that documented the war's landscapes, soldiers, and aftermath. Fallen Army soldiers were not allowed to be photographed. Only enemy Confederate dead were permitted to be shown. Those images provided a stark portrayal of the carnage and suffering on the battlefield, fundamentally changing the public perceptions of war from those early idyllic paintings to the actual brutality of battle. Alexander Gardner was one of Brady's hired photographers, who later ended his relationship with Brady because Brady would attribute Gardner's photographs as his own. Antietam was the first battle to depict the grim and bloody truth of Civil War through the lens of photographer Alexander Gardner, his assistant James Gibson, and his traveling darkroom. During his trips, Gardner moved across the battlefield, taking advantage of another new photographic technique that increased the impact of war images: the stereoscope, the Civil War version of the Viewmaster. Two lenses captured two simultaneous photographs, and when seen through a viewer, created a three-dimensional image. Parlors were filled with cards and viewers as stereo views became the rage in America. Of the approximately 90 images Gardner took at Antietam, about 70 were in stereo, adding a new, horrific view of the American landscape to home collections. Throughout his career, Brady photographed thousands of people, including General Ulysses S. Grant, General Robert E. Lee, founder of the American Red Cross Clara Barton, and famous inventor Thomas Edison. Abraham Lincoln stated that public awareness through Brady's photographs of him helped him become U.S. President. Brady's most famous portrait of Lincoln can be viewed anytime on your $5 bill. And if you don't have a $5 bill, you can view another Brady portrait of our Civil War president on the Lincoln penny. Despite the historical importance of his Civil War work, Brady faced significant financial challenges. Having risked his fortune on his Civil War enterprise, Brady lost the gamble and fell into bankruptcy. He died in 1896, penniless and underappreciated. He was buried in Congressional Cemetery in Washington, paid for by the veterans of the 7th Infantry. Although he died in relative obscurity, Mathew Brady's influence can be seen in subsequent generations of photojournalists who sought to capture the essence of historical moments. The earliest photographs printed in newspapers were typically reproduced using a process called wood engraving. In this process, the photograph was first transferred onto a wooden block, which was then carved by skilled artisans to create a printing block. Many photographs of the Civil War were translated into engravings, which were then printed in newspapers and magazines. The Spanish-American War of 1898 marked a pivotal moment in the history of the United States and coincided with the emergence of a powerful tool in journalism, photojournalism. photographers armed with compact cameras ventured to the front lines to capture the raw and unfiltered realities of war. Notable newspapermen like William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer recognized the impact of these visuals and actively competed to publish the most sensational images in their newspapers, regardless of the truth. John Hemmett, a noted horse racing photographer and the first to take aerial pictures from a hot air balloon, was contracted by the U.S. government to take photographs of the wreckage of the USS Maine in Havana, Cuba. He also accompanied Theodore Roosevelt's Rough Riders to Cuba to document the Spanish-American War for William Hearst Publications. John Hemmett's experiences in Cuba during the Spanish-American War were chronicled in his 520-page book called Cannon and Camera, which was published in 1898. So, how were Spanish-American war photos printed in newspapers back in 1898? The answer lies in halftones. At the time, printing ink could only be run as black, no shades of gray. So newspaper editors broke up a photo into a series of black dots and blended them with the opacity of the newspaper print to create the illusion of gray. After it was developed and pasted on the line negative to produce a printing plate, it was put on the press and a newspaper page was printed. In 1912, just 2 years before the outbreak of the First World War, the Eastman Kodak Company launched a new camera for the masses. It was called the Vest Pocket Kodak Camera, shortened to VPK. The response was astonishing. Thousands bought the new VPK technology, smaller, lighter, portable cameras using solenoid film on rolls, which produced images of a consistent quality. The VPK camera measured 2.5 inches by 4 3/4 inches and came with a military case that could be attached to a belt. When the Great War began in 1914, the new compact vest pocket Kodak camera was brought along by soldiers to document history. While soldiers were using their weapons to shoot their enemy, they were also shooting their cameras throughout the conflict. Once the war began, the sale of these cameras increased fivefold, and by the end of the war in 1918, almost 2 million cameras had been sold. Once World War I began, military authorities quickly realized that photography posed a threat to surveillance and espionage activities. Many nations established dedicated propaganda agencies to control and direct the flow of information during World War I, including photography. Just days after the U.S. entered the war, President Woodrow Wilson established the Committee on Public Information, which became a powerful tool for disseminating information and propaganda during the Great War. Under military law, personal cameras were not allowed on the battlefield, and possession of a camera or film was punishable via court-martial and could lead to a possible death sentence. Despite these strict military regulations, soldiers continued to sneak their cherished VPKs off to war and send photographic evidence of their experiences back home. With the military banning journalists from reporting early setbacks in the war, newspaper editors offered soldiers $1,000 for their VPK photographs, over 10 times the lieutenant's salary. Kodak and other camera companies continued to manufacture and market cameras that were ideal for a soldier to purchase and use while serving their time in the military. A Kodak advertisement from the time read, "Make the parting gift a Kodak." Another ad blatantly advertised the VPK as the soldier's Kodak. Another popular Kodak camera used by soldiers during the First World War was the autographic camera, launched in 1914. With this camera, the photographer could write captions on the edge of the negative by using a stylus to apply pressure to the sensitive paper between the film and the backing after exposure. When the film was developed, the caption would appear on the photograph. Many of the soldier-made photographs that survive today were made with the autographic camera. During World War I, the United States Signal Corps played a crucial role in documenting the war effort through photography with both still and film cameras. Photography was used for military intelligence, weather forecasting, and aviation. In the trenches of World War I, official Signal Corps military photographers like Edward Steichen and Lewis Hine documented the unprecedented scale of industrial warfare. Edward Steichen served as chief of the photographic section of the American Expeditionary Forces, capturing the transformation of warfare with his aerial photographs and innovative techniques. Lewis Hine focused on the human toll, depicting the faces of soldiers and the war-weary civilians left to navigate a changed world. Hine served as a photographer with the Red Cross. There were also female wartime photographers during World War I who worked as journalists with the camera. Helen Johns Kirkland was a photojournalist active at the end of World War I, working as a correspondent for Leslie's Illustrated Weekly in Europe. Her familiarity with Western Europe, ability to communicate in several languages, and instinct to view scenes photographically were assets to her photojournalism assignments. Like many of her male colleagues, she covered a variety of subjects that required facing danger and capturing images that could be readily published to convey the war visually. And when the news was the headlines, Helen and her husband were there, documenting the end of the Great War, with this famous photo taken at the Palace of Versailles. The visual impact of World War I combat photography remains a significant part of the war's legacy, highlighting the human cost and sacrifices made during this unprecedented chapter in history. In our next Mark in History episode, we will focus on photography coverage of World War II. If history can be taught with stories, it can never be forgotten. Please like our video, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell to stay informed on the latest videos. And don't forget to leave your comments below and tell us what you like about this video.